In the quiet suburbs of Willow Creek, the streets are lined with perfectly manicured lawns, pastel-colored homes, and the hum of peaceful routines. From the outside, it's the image of idyllic community living. Neighbors wave as they pass each other, children ride their bikes without a care, and families host weekend barbecues in their backyards. But beneath the surface of this picturesque neighborhood, an unspoken tension lingers, one that would soon boil over in a way no one could ignore. For the Johnson family, moving into Willow Creek felt like a dream come true. After years of saving and hard work, Lisa and Marcus Johnson had finally purchased their first home. They envisioned a fresh start for their two young children, Aiden and Maya, in a place where they could grow up safe and surrounded by opportunity. Their house was modest but filled with love, and the Johnsons wasted no time making it their own, planting flowers in the garden, hanging wind chimes on the porch, and painting a vibrant mural on the fence that celebrated their culture and family values. However, not everyone in the neighborhood welcomed their arrival with open arms. Tom Henderson, their next-door neighbor, seemed to take an immediate dislike to the Johnsons. He was a gruff, middle-aged man who rarely smiled and often muttered under his breath when passing by their property. The tension began subtly at first: disapproving glares, loud complaints about minor issues, and passive-aggressive comments about keeping the neighborhood's standards intact. But things escalated one fateful evening. The Johnsons returned home from a family outing to find their property in ruins. The mural they had painted with so much pride was defaced with crude, hateful slurs. Their flower beds were trampled, the wind chimes shattered on the ground, and their mailbox smashed beyond recognition. The sight was devastating. Lisa stood frozen in shock, tears streaming down her face, while Marcus clenched his fists in anger, struggling to contain his frustration. Aiden, their 10-year-old son, asked the question that broke their hearts. Why would someone do this to us? The answer was as complex as it was painful. Acts of hate like this were rooted in prejudice, ignorance, and fear, poisonous forces that had persisted through generations and continued to rear their heads in ways both blatant and subtle. In this case, the Johnsons became targets simply because of the color of their skin. This incident wasn't just about property damage. It was an attack on their identity, their sense of belonging, and their right to exist peacefully in a space they called home. The Johnsons were determined not to let this go unanswered. What they didn't know, however, was that justice, karma, some might say, was already in motion. The stage was set for a chain of events that would expose the truth, challenge perceptions, and remind everyone in Willow Creek that actions have consequences. What happens when a moment of hate meets an unstoppable force of resilience and accountability? This story would soon show them all. The day after the vandalism, the Johnsons stood in their front yard, surveying the damage. Neighbors walked by, some casting sympathetic glances, others quickly looking away as though ignoring the problem might make it disappear. Lisa and Marcus felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and the burning question of why. Marcus decided to call the police. He believed that reporting the crime was the first step toward justice. But when the officer arrived, the response was far from reassuring. The officer, a young man with a dismissive demeanor, took down the details of the incident but seemed indifferent to its gravity. "It's probably just some kids messing around," he said with a shrug. "We'll file a report, but don't get your hopes up." This response stung. It felt like a dismissal not only of the crime itself, but of the Johnsons' right to feel safe and respected in their own community. Lisa spoke up, her voice firm despite the lump in her throat. "This isn't just vandalism. This is hate. Look at the words they used. This wasn't random." But the officer didn't seem convinced. He left with a promise to look into it, though the Johnsons doubted much would come of it. Meanwhile, Tom Henderson watched from his porch, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. He made no effort to hide his disdain, even as the Johnsons cleaned up the mess. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was involved, but without proof, there was little they could do. Determined not to let the incident go unnoticed, Lisa took to social media. She shared photos of the vandalism, describing what had happened and how it had made her family feel. "We moved here hoping to find a safe and welcoming place to raise our kids," she wrote. "Instead, we were met with this. This is not just about us. It's about what kind of community we want to be. Her post quickly gained traction. Friends, family, and even strangers flooded the comments with messages of support and outrage. Some shared their own experiences with similar incidents, creating a powerful chorus of voices that refused to let this act of hate go unchallenged. The post also caught the attention of local community leaders and activists. One of them, a woman named Angela Green, reached out to the Johnsons. Angela was a longtime advocate for racial justice and equity in the area, and she offered her support. "This isn't just about one incident," Angela said during their first meeting. "This is about systemic issues that have been ignored for far too long. But we're going to make sure your voices are heard." Together, they organized a neighborhood meeting to address the incident and discuss broader concerns about racism and discrimination in Willow Creek. The meeting was tense. Some neighbors expressed their sympathy for the Johnsons, while others downplayed the seriousness of the vandalism. "We've never had issues like this before," one man said. "Maybe you're blowing it out of proportion." Angela responded calmly, but firmly. "Incidents like this don't happen in a vacuum. They're a symptom of deeper problems. Ignoring them only allows those problems to grow." As the conversation continued, the Johnsons noticed that Tom Henderson remained silent. He sat in the back of the room, arms crossed, his face a mask of indifference. But his silence spoke volumes. In the days that followed, tensions in the neighborhood grew. Some residents rallied behind the Johnsons, leaving flowers and notes of support on their doorstep. Others sided with Tom, accusing the Johnsons of stirring up trouble and making it about race. The Johnsons began to feel the weight of the conflict. Lisa struggled to focus at work, haunted by the memory of her children's fear. Marcus stayed up late every night, replaying the events in his mind and wondering what more he could do. Even Aiden and Maya, usually so full of energy, seemed withdrawn and quiet. But despite the challenges, the Johnsons refused to back down. They continued to push for answers, filing complaints with the local police department and working with Angela to keep the issue in the public eye. They wanted justice, not just for themselves, but for anyone who had ever felt unsafe or unwelcome in their own home. Then one evening, a breakthrough came. A neighbor who lived across the street approached the Johnsons with a nervous expression. "I think you should see this," she said, holding up her phone. She had a security camera installed on her property, and it had captured footage of the night the vandalism occurred. The video showed a shadowy figure sneaking onto the Johnsons' property, a can of spray paint in hand. The person's face wasn't immediately clear, but as the figure turned to look around, the camera caught a brief but unmistakable glimpse. It was Tom Henderson. The Johnsons finally had proof. But the question remained, what would they do with it? With the security footage in hand, the Johnsons felt a renewed sense of determination. For days, they had grappled with feelings of powerlessness, but now they had evidence, undeniable proof of Tom Henderson's involvement. As Marcus and Lisa watched the video over and over, a mix of emotions flooded through them. Anger at Tom's audacity, relief that they finally had clarity, and apprehension about what came next. The first step was to present the evidence to the police. This time, Lisa insisted on speaking directly to a senior officer. When they arrived at the station, they showed the footage to Sergeant Rachel Lopez, who immediately took the matter seriously. "This is significant," she said, her tone firm. "We'll launch an official investigation and follow up with Mr. Henderson." Although the Johnsons were relieved to finally be heard, they knew this was only the beginning. Legal action could take months, and they worried about how Tom might retaliate once he realized they had exposed him. Back in the neighborhood, word of the security footage began to spread. Angela Green encouraged the Johnsons to keep the community informed, believing transparency was the key to mobilizing support. Together, they organized another meeting, this time to present the evidence and demand accountability. The meeting was held in the local community center, and it was packed. Neighbors, journalists, and even local activists attended, creating a tense but electric atmosphere. Marcus played the video for everyone to see, and gasps echoed through the room as Tom's face appeared on the screen. Tom, who had been conspicuously absent from the meeting, was now the center of attention in a way he couldn't avoid. Whispers filled the room as people debated what this meant for their community. Angela spoke up, her voice steady and resolute. This isn't just about one man's actions, she said. This is about the kind of community we want to live in. Will we tolerate hate, or will we stand together against it? Some neighbors, previously skeptical of the Johnsons' claims, began to shift their stance. The evidence was irrefutable, and it forced them to confront the uncomfortable reality that one of their own had targeted a family out of malice and prejudice. Others, however, remained defensive. "He's been here for years," one man said. "Maybe he just made a mistake." Marcus responded with quiet strength. "A mistake? Destroying our property and writing slurs on our fence wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. And if we let this slide, we're telling our kids and everyone else that this kind of behavior is okay." As the meeting ended, the atmosphere was heavy with tension, but the Johnsons felt a glimmer of hope. The tide was beginning to turn, and more people were starting to stand with them. The investigation into Tom's actions moved quickly. Armed with the footage and a formal complaint from the Johnsons, the police obtained a warrant to search his property. What they found was shocking. Cans of spray, paint matching the ones used in the vandalism, along with a notebook filled with hateful scribbles and plans for further harassment. When confronted with the evidence, Tom initially denied everything. But as the pressure mounted, his defenses crumbled. He admitted to vandalizing the Johnsons' property, claiming he was frustrated by their presence in the neighborhood. "They don't belong here," he said, his words dripping with entitlement and prejudice. The admission was damning. Charges were filed against Tom, and the case gained significant media attention. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a reflection of the broader issue of racial tensions in suburban America. The Johnsons were thrust into the spotlight, with Lisa and Marcus giving interviews about their experience. Despite the overwhelming support they received from the public, the process was emotionally exhausting. "We never wanted this kind of attention," Lisa said in one interview. "We just wanted to live our lives in peace. But if sharing our story helps others stand up to hate, then it's worth it." In the weeks that followed, the Johnsons noticed a shift in their neighborhood. Neighbors who had once kept their distance began reaching out, offering words of encouragement, and even helping to repair the damage to their property. The community came together to repaint the mural on the Johnsons' fence, transforming it into a powerful symbol of resilience and unity. But not everyone was ready to move forward. A small group of residents continued to defend Tom, accusing the Johnsons of blowing things out of proportion and dividing the neighborhood. It was a painful reminder that progress was never easy or unanimous. For the Johnsons, the investigation and its discoveries were a turning point. They had uncovered the truth, exposed the perpetrator, and sparked a conversation that forced their community to confront its values. But they knew there was still work to be done, not just in their neighborhood, but everywhere. As the case against Tom Henderson made its way through the legal system, the Johnsons found themselves at the center of a movement they hadn't anticipated. What began as an act of hate against their family had transformed into a broader conversation about accountability, justice, and the importance of standing up to prejudice. One of the most significant moments of transformation came during a community-led restorative justice meeting. Organized by Angela Green, this meeting brought together neighbors, local leaders, and even Tom Henderson himself. The idea wasn't just to punish Tom for his actions, but to address the underlying issues that led to them and to begin healing the community. Tom sat stiffly in his chair, his expression a mix of defensiveness and discomfort. Across from him sat Lisa and Marcus, flanked by Angela and several other supportive neighbors. The room was quiet as Lisa began to speak. "You didn't just destroy our property," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "You tried to destroy our sense of safety, our pride, and our belief that this could be our home. What you did hurt us deeply, not just as a family, but as human beings." Marcus followed, his tone measured but firm. "We're not here to humiliate you, Tom. We're here because we believe that people can change. But change starts with taking responsibility for your actions." For a moment, Tom said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what I was thinking," he muttered. "I was angry, and I let it get the best of me. I was wrong. I'm sorry." His apology wasn't perfect, nor did it erase the harm he'd caused. But it was a start, Angela emphasized that apologies had to be followed by action. Words are important, she said, but they're only the first step. What matters now is what you do moving forward. Tom agreed to participate in community service and educational workshops about racial equity. He also committed to publicly addressing the neighborhood to acknowledge his wrongdoing and apologize directly to the Johnsons and the wider community. As these steps unfolded, the Johnsons noticed a gradual but profound shift in the neighborhood. The mural on their fence became a powerful symbol, with neighbors adding their own touches, positive messages, handprints, and symbols of unity. What had once been a target of hate was now a celebration of resilience and diversity. The Johnsons' children, Aiden and Maya, also began to heal. Aiden, who had been withdrawn since the incident, found his voice through art. Inspired by the mural, he started creating his own drawings, using bright colors and bold designs to express his feelings. Maya, too young to fully understand the complexities of what had happened, found comfort in the warmth and support of the community. The ripple effects of the transformation extended beyond the neighborhood. Local schools invited Angela and the Johnsons to speak about their experience, using it as a teaching moment for students. This isn't just about one family or one incident, Angela told the students. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Meanwhile, the legal case against Tom reached its conclusion. He was convicted of vandalism and a hate crime, resulting in community service, mandatory education, and a fine to cover the damages to the Johnsons' property. The sentence was not about revenge, but about accountability and the hope for rehabilitation. Despite the challenges they had faced, the Johnsons emerged stronger and more united. They had turned their pain into purpose, using their platform to advocate for change. Marcus reflected on the journey during a community event celebrating the mural. "This wasn't the story we wanted," he said, "but it's the story we were given. And we've learned that even in the darkest moments, there's an opportunity to create light." The neighborhood, too, underwent a transformation. While not everyone was on board, the majority of residents embraced the changes, working together to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment. New initiatives, such as cultural festivals and neighborhood watch programs, were launched to foster unity and ensure everyone felt safe and valued. Tom Henderson, though still grappling with the consequences of his actions, began to show signs of genuine change. He attended every workshop and community meeting, often sitting quietly but listening intently. One day, he approached Marcus and Lisa with a simple but heartfelt gesture, a bouquet of flowers and a note that read, "I will do better." The Johnsons accepted the gesture, not as a sign of forgetting, but as a step toward forgiveness. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Marcus said, "but it can happen if we're willing to put in the work." By the end of the year, Willow Creek was a different place. The incident that had once divided the community now served as a reminder of the power of accountability, empathy, and resilience. The Johnsons, though still healing, felt a renewed sense of belonging. They had fought for their family and their values, and in doing so, they had inspired others to do the same. Months after the ordeal, life in Willow Creek settled into a new rhythm. The Johnsons' once vandalized fence now stood as a vibrant mural of hope, adorned with messages of unity and love from neighbors who had come together to support them. It was a visual testament to the community's resilience and its willingness to confront its darker truths in pursuit of a brighter future. Lisa often reflected on how far they had come. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching Aiden and Maya play in the yard, she turned to Marcus and said, "I used to wonder if we made the right decision moving here. But now, I think this is exactly where we were meant to be." Marcus nodded, his gaze fixed on the mural. "It hasn't been easy, but I think we've shown people what standing up looks like. We've proven that hate doesn't win." The community's transformation was tangible. Initiatives inspired by the Johnsons' experience continued to grow. Angela Green, whose activism had been instrumental in rallying support, led the charge in creating a neighborhood inclusion council. The council's mission was to address incidents of bias, educate residents on issues of equity, and ensure that Willow Creek became a place where everyone felt welcome. Local schools also took action, Workshops on diversity and inclusion became part of the curriculum, teaching students to recognize and challenge prejudice in all its forms. Aiden, who had found his voice through art, was invited to share his mural-inspired drawings at a school assembly. "This is what I see when I think about our family and our home," he explained, holding up a piece filled with bright colors and smiling faces. His words and artwork moved many in the audience, showing how even the youngest voices could inspire change. For Maya, the lasting impact was more personal. One day, she came home from school with a big smile on her face. "Mommy," she said excitedly, "we learned about heroes today. I said you and Daddy are my heroes because you're brave." Lisa felt tears well up in her eyes. In that moment, she realized the true legacy of their struggle, teaching their children the importance of courage, resilience, and standing up for what's right. But the journey wasn't without its ongoing challenges. A small faction in the neighborhood still resisted the changes, clinging to the belief that the Johnsons had brought unnecessary attention and division. These dissenting voices occasionally surfaced at community meetings or in anonymous comments online. The Johnsons, however, chose to focus on the progress that had been made rather than the negativity that lingered. "You can't change everyone," Marcus would often say, "but you can change enough to make a difference." One of the most significant milestones came during a town hall meeting a year after the vandalism. Tom Henderson, who had been quiet since his sentencing, stood up to speak. The room fell silent as he addressed the crowd. "I've spent the last year thinking about what I did and why I did it," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I let my ignorance and anger control me, and I hurt a family that didn't deserve it. I can never take back what I did, but I'm trying every day to be better." He turned to Lisa and Marcus, his eyes sincere. "I'm sorry, truly, and I hope, one day, I can earn your forgiveness." While some in the room remained skeptical, many, including the Johnsons, saw this as a sign of genuine growth. After the meeting, Marcus approached Tom. "Forgiveness isn't easy," he said, "but it starts with accountability. Keep doing the work." Tom nodded, and though their relationship would never be one of friendship, there was a newfound sense of understanding, a small but significant step toward healing. As the years passed, the Johnsons continued to be pillars of strength and advocates for change in Willow Creek. Their story resonated far beyond their neighborhood, inspiring similar movements in nearby towns. They were invited to speak at conferences, write op-eds, and share their journey in hopes of sparking dialogue and action in other communities. Reflecting on their experience, Lisa once said in a radio interview, "This wasn't just about us. It was about creating a world where no one has to feel unsafe in their own home." If our story can help even one person find their voice or stand up to hate, then it's all been worth it. The long-term impact of the Johnsons' courage was undeniable. Willow Creek became a symbol of transformation, showing how even the darkest moments could lead to growth and progress when people came together with empathy and determination. For the Johnsons, life went on not as victims of hate, but as champions of hope and resilience. They had turned their pain into purpose, their fear into strength, and their struggle into a legacy of change. And as they looked out at their mural, now a beloved fixture of the neighborhood, they knew they had built something lasting, not just for their family, but for everyone who believed in the power of love over hate.